Say adios to Eric Cantor. I'm John Phillips, and this is After Hours. House Majority Leader Eric Cantor just suffered a humiliating defeat against Tea Party challenger and economics professor Dave Bratt. Political observers are chalking the unexpected outcome on everything from the strength of the Tea Party, Eric Cantor losing touch with his district, to bizarre outcomes in low-turnout elections. While all of these may have been contributing factors, they weren't the factor. Make no mistake, Eric Cantor lost this election because of his support for open borders. Voters don't want it, and Republican primary voters especially don't want it. Cantor defended himself by playing semantics, and Bratt, who has a PhD in economics, never stopped making the economic argument against illegal immigration, and that became an easy sell to voters. If the House GOP learns anything from this election, it should be this: no amnesty under no circumstances. Here to kick this around is the After Hours panel. She's the host of the Tammy Bruce radio show, which you can get online at tammybruce.com. Tammy Bruce. Right next to her is a man sitting in for the fair-minded civil rights defense attorney Leo Terrell. He, of course, is stand-up comic Mr. Stephen Kruiser. And in for our good pal Scott Ott is the one, the only Mr. Stephen Green, PJTV contributor extraordinaire.
Were we not invited to the party? Where are the other guys?
I think Leo and Scott are clearly doing something. You know, there's a remake of Dumb and Dumber coming out. So they might be camping out in front of the movie theater, waiting to get seats in the front row.
Honeymoon in Vegas.
Oh, there you go. That's what it is.
Very possible.
That's what it is.
All right. Kruiser, we'll start with you on this one. What do you make of this shocking election in the state of Virginia? Is this getting the attention of every Republican in Washington?
I think it did for about a half an hour, but the Republicans in Washington seem to have picked up the trait that the Democrats have, where they can immediately dismiss history more than 24 hours old. And nowhere, on no subject, no issue, is there a greater divide between the elites in Washington and the regular voters in America. I mean, you look even in my native state of Arizona, where John McCain and Jeff Flake are both immigration guys, and you can't walk down the street in Arizona and meet somebody that's supportive of that position. It just doesn't happen there. But these guys are both spending all their time in D.C. They're both big immigration reform, and let's stop calling it immigration reform, okay? Listen, making something that's illegal suddenly legal is not just reform. It's a massive overhaul.
Let's just look at the numbers here, Tammy, because this is what politicians do. You look at John McCain, who's probably one of the biggest advocates in Washington, D.C. for amnesty and has been for quite some time. He and Ted Kennedy really were the two faces of it. Now it's Luis Gutierrez. When he became the Republican nominee for president in 2008, he did worse among Hispanics than Republicans that were nominated before him. There's no correlation at all between supporting amnesty and winning over Hispanic voters, but we do know that Republican primary voters and the American people in general don't want it.
Well, look, John McCain also effectively lied to his constituents his last go-around. He knew that it was important to the base, and he walked around the border and talked about, we got to get the border fence. Suddenly,
build the dang fence.
Build the damn fence was his, theme. And, of course, it was nonsense. But this is the difference of, well, maybe people learn and they're going to represent us because they're our representatives. But that, of course, didn't happen. He lied. He did shenanigans, and people fell for it. I think that we've seen this. I think that the Cantor result is after years of Americans being tired of being lied to, being tired of being pandered to, patronized, only to turn around to find out that they're getting richer, richer, richer. Our lives are getting pushed down and getting, our economy, our income is getting less. The job situation is horrible. And in the meantime, they talk about legalizing 11 to 20 million people when our unemployment rate is the highest it's been, not the on the books, but the off the books. You got kids here, 16 to 19-year-old unemployment rate in San Bernardino, California, and in Portland, Oregon is over 50%. Throughout the Southwest, it's double digits. So people have realized, look, they're never going to do the right thing. And I think that the Cantor election was a statement, in addition to the fact that Cantor took everyone for granted. I think it was a combination of factors, with immigration being the tipping point.
Stephen Green, does this effectively kill the push for amnesty in Washington, D.C., at least for this Congress?
Oh, who knows what Washington gets up to once it sets its mind on something, that throbbing, pulsing, icky thing it calls a mind. I think the lesson to take away from this is, look, Eric Cantor got out in front of his constituents. He disagreed with them on a big issue. And even if I agreed with Cantor on amnesty, I would have voted against him in this primary. And the reason is he didn't listen. He was so dead set on a deal, almost any deal it seemed like. He was so dead set on cutting a deal with this White House that it made him look like an idiot. He broke trust with his constituents because they understand what he doesn't, and that is you cannot broker a good faith deal with this White House. It's impossible. Everything is politics to them. A deal would have been suicide for the GOP. The good people of VA7 knew that. Eric Cantor didn't. That's why he's out of a job.
Is there anyone on this panel that would have voted for Eric Cantor? I wouldn't have voted for him.
Not with somebody like Brad opposite him. And then the good news for Brad is the Democrats do have someone now who's going to be running against him. And I think it's more than appropriate that a Democrat is a vampire lover. He's writing a new novel about vampires. I mean, how perfect is that?
God.
I thought, boy, this is like a big sign.
Tammy, you brought up something interesting with McCain. This is the difference between the Senate and the House and why I like the House much better. Because senators can be awful for 4 or 5 years, and in the last 8 months, pretend to be something different. And the voters are always duped by it. Congressmen are held accountable immediately, so the memory stays fresher with the electorate.
Talk to me about this, Stephen Kruiser. Why is it, because amnesty, I think we all agree, was the tipping point issue in this election. Why is it that Cantor took the bullet, but Lindsey Graham survived?
The Senate thing again. Lindsey Graham played nice. He's been talking real tough against the Obama administration in the last few weeks on the Taliban deal. He's been pretending to be a repeat. It's the John McCain script, which was the Orrin Hatch script, which is right before, when it's primary time, you start acting uber conservative again. And that's what he's been doing. And senators get away with this. That's what drives me nuts about the Senate.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
Is he recognized the Tea Party threat early on. He's also, even though I can't stand whenever...
He took it seriously, too.
He took it seriously.
Yep.
I play Dancing Queen whenever I hear about him. He took it seriously. He's well-liked. He visited his district, and that helped. But the other thing that helped, 6 people divided the vote against him.
Multiple.
Eric Cantor had 1 guy. So I think there's a technical aspect.
And an articulate guy, too. In fact, let's listen to Dave Bratt. This is what he had to say after the election.
I can't communicate to you what it means to say every person that worked across every county, the miracle that just happened, this is a miracle from God that just happened.
All right, Stephen Green, talk to me about the ramifications of this election on the presidential campaign, because you have big-name people who are going to raise big dollars, namely Jeb Bush and maybe even Chris Christie, who take a position on illegal immigration that's pretty similar to the one that Eric Cantor took. And then you've got others that are more hardliners who I'm sure will enter the race. Is this a foreshadowing of what's going to happen in the presidential election?
Well, first I want to talk about this election that's coming up in November, because it's much easier to predict stuff that is right around the corner rather than 2 years out. But this is why it's so fun to watch for the Republicans, because they do it wrong. Now, I'm a registered independent, maybe I shouldn't say this, but the way party politics is supposed to work is you fight it all out during the primary process. The grassroots selects the nominee, and then everybody's supposed to rally behind the nominee through to Election Day. Republicans, no. They have the primary, they select the candidate, and then the real fight begins. The establishment is pulling out the long knives for Brett. They're going to go after him with everything they've got, even if that puts a Democrat in Eric Cantor's seat, because they do it completely backwards. We saw this in 2012, we saw this in 2008, and we saw the boneheadedness in 2006. So what's going to happen in 2016? Who knows? But I think this might open a door for a Republican such as Scott Walker, who right now seems like a dark horse. He doesn't seem to have the money. He doesn't seem to have the Wall Street guys. But he does have real support across the spectrum in a blue-leaning state. That's what I think this might open up. This might drive something home in D.C., but I think it certainly sends a message to primary voters that they can be heard.
And John, can I just say, you mentioned money at the beginning and speaking with Stephen.
Yeah.
that clearly the money aspect has to be considered as well. The obvious $5 million spent by Cantor and the $125,000 spent by Bratt. It tells you that if your message is wrong, you can pour all the money in the world into it, and it's not going to convince the voter now.
You know, Kruiser, the narrative is that in this election, talk radio was the one that defeated Eric Cantor. You had Laura Ingraham, who was down there very actively involved in this. Mark Levin was going after him for quite some time. My pal Ann Coulter, not as a host, but as a guest on the radio, was going after him. And that was the group of people that they think really put this race on the map. And I think to a certain extent that is true. But I'll tell you which guy did more to influence the outcome of this election than all of those guys combined. Matt Drudge. Because Matt Drudge on the Drudge Report had the headlines of all of the illegal alien children here in California being held at some of the Army bases, or I guess closed down military bases. And he put that issue of illegal immigration on the front page of that website for virtually the entire week before the election. And it was on top of people's minds. People were talking about it, and that influences what goes on in talk radio really more than anything.
Great point.
That's true. Well, if talk radio were that influential, we'd be winning a lot more elections, okay? So that's, you know, because they're on the side of every grassroots guy, all the ones that have lost in the last couple of years, too. So the Drudge thing seems more plausible to me than anything else. And also, there's so much going on here. You know, the Republican voters in that district in Virginia, they might be a little weary of all the Democrat victories there. Like, you never know what's going on in a given congressional district either. There's a lot of psychological stuff, and it's easy for people at the other end of the country to say maybe this, maybe that, maybe this. But I would go with your Drudge analysis far more than talk radio, although it's been popular to blame, because the lefty sites already are blaming talk radio for this. But one last thing, though.
Yeah.
Bratt stayed on message. He didn't get distracted by anything else. He went with the immigration thing. He hammered him on it, and he never let up.
And he's an impressive guy.
Yeah, that's key. The candidate has to be, really also has to deliver. It's not going to be anybody. The candidate has to deliver for people to toss over someone like Cantor.
How important is Matt Drudge in your opinion, Stephen Green?
I have a set of browser tabs that are open 24/7. Unless I'm on vacation, when I don't have my laptop with me, on every computer I own, on every tablet I own, on everything, I have a set of these 7 tabs, and two of those tabs, Instapundit and Drudge Report, and I go to Drudge probably more than Instapundit. You know, you're onto something with this specifically. There's this real feeling, and Drudge hammered this home in the last month, that everything is falling apart. It feels like everything in this country is falling apart. Our health care is falling apart. Our border is falling apart. It's absolute lawlessness down there. And people are ready for, I think, any kind of change. We were ready for change after 8 years of Bush. We ended up getting more of the same, only worse, only multiplied. This may be the time for us to turn the corner. I don't know, but this world falling apart feeling has been so well encapsulated by Drudge in these last few weeks that that may just be what drove it home for Brett.
I'll go one step farther. I'll say that Matt Drudge is maybe the most influential conservative in the country. More than Rush, more than Mark Levin, more than Hannity, more than Roger Ailes, maybe.
Where you're looking at, I wouldn't say about when it comes to Roger Ailes. I think that there might be a combination there when it comes to the rhythm of how news is moved. But let's not mistake that just because someone might be on television or you recognize them, that those are the influencers. That's an excellent point. It remains the case, but as the influence of the internet has risen, that has just, of course, multiplied the impact of someone like Drudge.
Tammy Bruce, you get the last word. You can read her column at WashingtonTimes.com, and you can always listen to her radio show at TammyBruce.com. Stephen Kruiser, thanks so much for pinch hitting.
It was a blast.
We got the switch hitter coming off the bench. Look at that. Getting a double. I'll give you a triple. And, of course, Stephen Green sitting in for our own Scott Ott. Thanks so much for joining us today.
I'll take a walk.
If you'd like to comment on today's show, you can do so in the comment section below. For After Hours, I'm John Phillips. Thanks for watching.